This episode contains talk and thought of politics. Viewer discretion is advised.
I'm an advocate for people understanding how strong they really are.
Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of the Jeff Heilman Project. I am, we're happy to be here in the booth. Andrew's got some new lights. Jeff, you've got a pair of new reading glasses, which I don't see.
I had them. They're
We got our
upstairs.
Starbucks.
They're on the desk. Yep. What's up, peoples?
A few.
Welcome.
Okay, before we
the
get into that,
podcast.
I'm just excited. I'm excited. I'm like sitting.
I don't know
Andrew
what
told
she's
me.
talking about.
He said you can't go barefoot on television.
You
I'm like,
can?
I'm going
You have a
to.
pedicure.
I'm sitting on my toes because I just want to. Like I'm.
I have a
It's funny
pedicure.
whenever I get up and I preach or teach, and you know it's going to get real if I put my hair in a ponytail and if I take my shoes off. But so today's going to be exciting. But before that. We always have a little small talk session. How's your week? You were talking to me before we started rolling. You've decided to, one of Christopher's advice from his very first episode was don't drink alcohol. And so you're choosing to abstain
Yes,
at the
I am
moment
abstinating.
and having to order things
Is that
like
a word?
tea
Coke is great.
and Diet Coke
And chicken wing. You get more chicken wings in anyway that way if you have
more chicken wings.
more chicken wings.
Well, it's just
Less
empty
filling.
calories. I mean, let's face it.
Well,
But
okay.
it does,
So the truth is that I looked up. I don't typically drink very much anyway. I don't really like it. I grew up around. I mean, basically, most of the folks in my family were alcoholics, and so it was almost like if you smoke, you're going to die. If you drink alcohol, you're going to become an alcoholic. If you have premarital sex, you will have a baby.
or STD.
Or STD. And if you drink alcohol, you'll probably get a DUI. Like it was so ingrained in fear that it was really too much the other way. So, but it's still there that like, that's just not something I want to do. So I've never once ever worried about or considered that I could ever become an alcoholic. I don't drink enough. I don't keep it around the house. I'm not interested in it. I don't hang out with people that drink for the most part. But as I'm approaching 50 and I started lifting thanks to Christopher back when I was 45, like right before I turned 46. So I've been lifting now for 3 years. Not that it shows much, but I started asking guys at the gym, I'm like, look, you're 35. You lift, you look great. You eat pretty healthy. I think I eat pretty healthy. Christopher would argue with that. But I'm lifting and not necessarily always on, but at least more than zero. And why am I not getting any results? And they all asked me two questions. How old are you? And how much alcohol do you drink? And I'm like, how much alcohol do I drink? Apparently not enough. And they're like, no. Don't listen to Arnold Schwarzenegger when he says, I just drank beer. I drank beer and I lifted weights and I felt great all the time. And that is why I'm so big. Nope. Apparently alcohol is a huge testosterone killer. And
Well, if
since
you're
I'm
taking steroids and drinking beer,
Yeah.
then I guess they
if
kind
you're
of
taking
equal
steroids and
each
drinking
other
beer,
out.
I guess you don't have to worry too much about the hops
Testosterone.
intake. But apparently it's a huge testosterone killer. And I could tell basically when I turned probably mid 40s, I could tell that my testosterone levels are probably at 20% of where they were when I was a kid. And so if it goes from 20% to 0%, that might be why I'm lifting weights and not getting any results. So I did just mentally in my mind, I was like, all right, I'm gonna see what happens if I
And
stop
how
drinking as much alcohol.
how's your week been
It's been
without
good.
alcohol?
It's been good. Another thing too that I thought was interesting, I went and looked just for kicks to find out what is the definition of an alcoholic. What does that mean? Like, where do they draw the line? And apparently, according to the American Medical Association, it is a mental disorder where there is a dependency on alcohol, which I don't feel dependent on alcohol. I don't think about it when I'm not drinking. I don't think about it when I am drinking, really. Just kind of there, and it's something fun to do with our
I remember
buddies.
when one of our friends, one of your friends, came to stay with us.
Who shall remain
a
nameless on
while
the
ago.
podcast.
Like they had to go buy, like we didn't have any alcohol because we had kids and we can't afford it.
Yeah.
They had to like go buy alcohol and
yeah,
bring it over.
that was
And
a
I'm
while.
like,
that was not one of my
I think
friends
that
I've
one
had
of the
recently, but-
definitions of an alcoholic is if you can't go a day without it.
Yeah. Well, and like
or
I said,
you
I
have
don't,
to buy it when you
I mean,
go
I
to
might-
somebody else's house
I
in
might
order to drink it.
2 beers or maybe 6 beers on a Friday once a month or once every other month, but I don't really think of that as being an alcoholic. So I wanted to find out, all right, let's see what it is. Maybe I've got an issue with it, right? Maybe because I enjoy it and I have fun with it. And it basically said you're an alcoholic if you're dependent upon it. You're an alcoholic if you can't go without it. You're an alcoholic if you can't stop drinking when you want to stop drinking.
That's a big one.
Then it also talked, but here was the thing when I was like, I don't know, is it talked about getting in the way of family, getting in the way of recreational or health-related activities, or getting in the way of work. And I started to think about what we always talk about, which is standards.
Mm-hmm.
And if my standard is, billionaire, if my standard is 100-hour work weeks and be able to make sure that my family is financially independently wealthy while I'm still young enough to take care of 9 people, if that's my standard and I'm not able to achieve that standard, then by definition,
It's
I could
impeding.
potentially say that alcohol is impeding. And I had a good night the other night with a buddy of mine. I went out and we had fun. And then I woke up, I think that would have been Saturday night. And I woke up on Sunday and it was like, it took some effort to get to church. Well, that would be impeding. That would be an impediment.
That's right.
Right. So I don't necessarily think that means I'm an alcoholic, but it was like, if you can't go light speed and that's your standard, and you're pared back from 186,000 miles a second to 140,000 miles a second, but your standard is light speed, then potentially you could do better without it. And I want to do better. I just want to.
Yeah.
I want to be able to live. If I've grown up working for Elon Musk and meeting Steve Wozniak when I was a kid, and John Chambers, who's a billionaire, and working for Jay Sharu Lal, who's now the CEO of Arista. These are not necessarily friends of mine, but they're people that I've come in close proximity with over years and years and years that are worth billions and hundreds of billions of dollars. And then we're kind of sucking along here in middle classville with my mind being stretched out to like, this is what you're capable of, right? And it's like, hey, if people are happy with bowling leagues and going out with their beers on Friday nights, I'm not criticizing that at all. I'm just saying if I want to do well and I have friends and people around me who are doing well and I want to achieve and I can't achieve and something gets in the way of that, then I have to really question, well, how bad do you want to win? And if you don't want to win bad enough to put down a beer or 2 a week, which is not that much of a sacrifice anyway, then maybe I need to check my ambition level.
Yeah. Hey,
So-
I stopped drinking. I mean, I do drink occasionally, but when I started counting calories as much as I do.
Yeah, you didn't drink
I
for
just
9 months when you were
No.
having a baby, and you didn't drink for 9 months when you were getting ready to go to
so,
Paris.
Like it's just
So
like
when you have a dream-
do I really want that 100-calorie
Yeah.
kick? I am not a very firm believer in drinking
I'm
calories. I
on
would
a
rather
yacht
eat them.
in Monte Carlo,
eat them.
if I'm renting, I would not buy a yacht. I don't need a yacht. I don't like water that much. But if I'm in Monte Carlo at the Monte Carlo Grand Prix and we've somehow arrived at the point where we can stay the week on a
There
rented
may or
yacht,
may not be a martini involved.
may or may not be a
Vespa.
martini involved. Yeah, there's going to be some champagne involved for sure. But, on a regular basis where I'm trying to make weight, I'm cutting down from I was 260 about a month and a half ago. I'm down to like 243. But I've been stuck at 243 for a couple of months. And so what do I got to do to get from 243 down into the 230s? I haven't seen the 230s in ages. But I need to be 225 if I'm going to really be at my fighting weight. And in order to do that, I can't do that and drink beer.
Well, today's episode I am excited about
You're
because
getting me excited. What are we talking about here?
a few, I'm not exactly sure. You can check the archives if you're listening at iTunes, Spotify, or perhaps watching us on YouTube.
Or the YouTube.
one of these episodes, because they don't always come out sequentially, we did an episode on pros and cons. And we discussed pros of. Now I'm going to. Andrew has a disclaimer. I'll give a disclaimer. This episode will contain political commentary conversation.
Yeah,
so
if you
viewer
guys
discretion.
don't like our political views, you should probably skip to the next episode.
Viewer discretion is advised.
Viewer discretion is advised.
So
if you're a teenager and you haven't earned the right to vote yet, please check with your parents.
We did an episode on pro-Democrat and pro job and pro-Democrat, and then we talked about one more pro. And the whole episode was about making sure that if you're going to give an opinion, if you're going to try to be in relationships, if you're going to be a friend to somebody, you better damn well know where they're coming from and try to empathize with where they're coming from. So today, tables are turning. And I'm going to ask you, Mr. Heilman, I'm going to let you go. Tell me, what are the pros to being a Republican, or you could call it a conservative, because the last episode we went from straight out saying pro-Democrat to liberal.
Yeah, that was an interesting exercise in empathy to try to figure out, because, again, if you're a Democrat, I love you. I appreciate you. I'd love to better understand their point of view, but the point of view.
You remembered the term. It was virtue signaling.
Virtue signaling. Yeah. Like having a Rolex,
acceptance,
having a Tesla, or being a Democrat. That seems to be you have no virtue if you're not a Democrat. That seems to be how it's positioned anyway. And I would say that I'm not even identified as being a Republican. I vote Republican. I have conservative values. I haven't voted for anybody that's not a Republican ever that I can think of.
We talked about voting according to principles,
registered
and
as
it
an
just
independent
seems like,
or libertarian. I think actually,
it just seems like at this time the party that leans most towards the principles that we adhere to happens to be that way.
Let's take a look. Let's tear into that for just a minute.
Yeah.
One of the things that Republicans typically side with is big business, big corporate business that should just be allowed to do whatever the heck they want and destroy the environment and destroy people's lives and all that stuff. And keep in mind, I'm more conservative in my politics now than I've probably been, certainly when I was younger. But there are some social and some economic issues that I may not necessarily agree with 100% on the party line. And I have been a part of the wake of my life being totally turned upside down. I wouldn't say destroyed, but I would say turned upside down because of large corporations who are run by humans that are not perfect, and they've created chaos in my life.
Hey, we grew up reading, Charles Dickens and Oliver Twist, and I grew up
blackening
watching
pots and polishing shoes and cleaning door tracks out.
My parents were straight out of typically right-wing conservatism, but man, you put on Norma Ray and we're right along with it, because there are there's standards and principles for humanity.
There are some people in large companies who are absolute
and they have
chimpanzees,
to be held accountable,
throwing feces through the bars at the viewers, and these people are in management. And I've worked for a bunch of them. And they feel so twisted and warped and uncomfortable in their own personal lives. How could they not, right? How could you crap on somebody that's in your employ that you are dependent upon to make your sales number, and yet you treat them like a goddamn chimpanzee? How could you possibly treat somebody like that unless you just have a horrible life? And I've had managers who I've gone out to drinks with them once or twice, and one guy who I still think to this day is one of the top guys. He'll remain nameless, so will the company that he worked for. But I remember going out to drinks with him, and he had 5 double vodka tonics in an hour and 15 minutes, and he weighed less than I do. And I'm like, I don't think I've had 5 vodka tonics since I was born. I certainly couldn't drink 5 in a week without throwing up and losing my cookies over it. And this guy was putting down 5 double vodka tonics in a day and a half. And of course, he's going through a horrible divorce. lost a huge house on the country club, which is, from his story, the wife was like, he can have anything but his dream house with his cronies on the country club, and lost a relationship with his kids, had to leave the state in order to save money on taxes so he could afford to pay alimony. And his whole life is turned upside down. And then he ends up being my manager, and I've got, the wife and kids and happy and making my number. And he was none of those things. And just absolutely did everything that he could to try to. And then when I finished number one on his team, he found a way to manage me out of the company anyway.
Yeah.
And it's like all I ever did for the guy was make him boatloads of money and close deals and set the standard for the rest of his team. And he could not get rid of me fast enough. So when you see people like that who just have horrible lives, they're pathetic human beings that really need to be prayed for and given a lot of latitude and grace, because if I woke up that miserable, I'd probably try to kill myself. Like that, there's just nothing to look forward to in their life. Absolute zero dopamine in their system, other than getting to the next double vodka tonic.
I think that it would appear, as Spider-Man would quote, with much power comes much responsibility. Yeah. And when you have higher ups in companies, and when you have these what seems to be portrayed as robber barons or hugely successful corporate.
That's not voting the party line with Republicans just because.
They have a huge amount of responsibility. And with all of that responsibility, often you make one bad decision and now you've got 300 people that are affected. Or you've got one, so not to excuse being an asshole, because that's not what we're talking about here.
No,
what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that if you were to group, just like we group people and say, well, the majority of the Democrat looks caring and empathetic, the majority of the conservative looks mean and penny pinching. If you're going to group them, just recognize that we don't all fall. It's not a black and white situation, which is why we try to look at the policies. We try,
do.
The entire time that they were having when Trump was working to get elected the first time, and they were having all these debates and stuff, like I turned all of that. I didn't want to hear anything from the media. I didn't want to hear anything. I just wanted to read in black and white. I just wanted to read what are the policies.
You guys want to watch a fascinating
Where
interview.
do you stand as
The Don Lemon interview of Elon Musk that just came out on Twitter was fantastic. That's you could not have more diametrically opposed points of view. It was done fairly civilly. I think Don crossed the line a couple times. But to me, every time I ask somebody on the conservative side to explain their point of view, I'm like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I pretty much agree with just about everything that person says, because I have a lot to try to conserve.
Yeah.
And when I ask for the opinion on the side of the opposition, I hear the same story every time, and it never makes sense. It does not make sense to me, this whole concept of equal opportunity. Like, what in the world is that? There's no such thing as equal opportunity, because what you're really saying is you want equal output. Mm-hmm. And there's no such thing as equal output, because everybody's going to approach a job a different way, an opportunity a different way. And somebody could say, I love what Jordan Peterson was talking about. He was talking about the fact that when they were saying, 4% of such demographic group has this job and 3% has another demographic group. And he's like, they don't want to do those jobs. A lot of them, it's because they don't want to do it. It's not something that's interesting to them, or it's not something that fits their profile. He was talking about how men typically, when tested, think more about things, and women, when tested, think more about people. And so for guys to want to be engineers because they think about things more, now granted, this is a gross stereotype, but we're talking about a stereotype that's been backed up by statistics from people who study psychology and read medical journals all day, every day. So we're not making this stuff up.
I don't get offended by the concept that women think about people, because there's a lot of...
Women think about people way more. They're way more.
That's how you make money, is by selling things to people, buying things, relationships.
And by the way, is it a I'm a white male approaching 50, and I will be the first one to tell you that the statistics say that women outsell men in residential real estate 6 to 1.
Yeah.
6 to 1, 6 times as many houses are sold by women as are sold by men. And that doesn't surprise me because
Well,
the
the women are
major
buying them, too.
influencer in the home purchase, I could give a rip where I live. I don't care where I live. I want to live in a nice neighborhood. I want you happy. I want to have a kitchen where we can come and have family time and meals. Other than that, I couldn't care less if we got Q-tips on the floor or my underwear on a chair.
That is true.
I don't care about those things. I care about focused approach to the highest possible priority in order to discharge my responsibilities as a dad, as a provider, as a husband, as an earner,
So if you were talking
as an entrepreneur.
to somebody,
But going back to that thing I was talking about before, men typically are more focused on things. Women are typically more focused on people. So is it, far-fetched to say that women might want to be nurses maybe a little bit more than dudes, and that dudes might want to be engineers maybe a little bit more than women, and that might have something to do with the statistics behind why there's so many more male engineers and so many more female nurses? Like, if you want to be an engineer and you're a woman, go do it. You can do it. And quite frankly, I can tell you, technology companies are way underrepresented by women. But I think it has a lot more to do with what people's interests are. I do not see women interviewing for the jobs that I go for, or women in the workforce entering or interested in being sales reps in software sales, in technology, or in, but they do really well in content creation. They're super successful in getting that kind of leverage. There's women that make way more money than guys do in those areas. So, and I've worked for some of the best female leaders. Ginny Rometty is one of them. She was one of the best CEOs in the history of IBM. She brokered the PwC acquisition in 2007 and transitioned IBM in its moment of glory when they needed a new song to sing into the analytics era and into 65% of their revenue in professional services, and became, effectively a Big Five consulting firm in and of themselves. So this talk about how, Whitey, the 50-year-old white dude is somehow evil because he's got a job that women don't want, maybe, or that other people aren't interested in to the point where they're willing to do what they got to do. Now, granted, is there gender inequality in pay? That's what we hear. I've certainly seen it myself. However, I also know that people that get to the top and that perform at the top level, they make the bucks. They get paid for excellence. There is so much room at the top world-class performance area. And having been homeless, having come from drug and alcohol addiction as a family, like in the ecosystem, in the nucleus of my family, having come from a stepbrother who went to jail, having come from drug and alcohol abuse, having come from adultery, having come from divorce, having come from dropping out of high school, having come from living on $4 an hour and trying to carve out an existence, taking food out of the trash on the way back, waiting tables, just hoping somebody doesn't finish their fish stick so you can eat it. Like, I've lived that life too, and we've been rich. And personally, I can tell you that the reason why we're doing better is because I think better.
I love and I'll repeat it, George Washington Carver said, "Do something ordinary in an extraordinary way, and you will garnish the attention.
Garner the attention.
Garner the attention of the world."
You'll garner attention
So
of the world.
do something ordinary in an extraordinary way, and you will garner the attention of the world. And I love that, because if you can think of finding something ordinary that you do better than anybody else, you just keep doing that thing, because eventually you will get the attention that you have, just because you're taking your gift and it's becoming something of excellence.
I think the biggest difference that I've seen in people who are conservative and people who are more liberal is that, I'm going to explain it this way. A friend of mine, Bob Coomer, that we knew when we were in the business back in late 90s, he had a running coach. He was a runner-up alternate for the U.S. Olympic team. I want to say 1992, I think. And Bob Coomer's coach was none other than Norman Vincent Peale, the head pastor of Marble Collegiate in New York City, which was Donald Trump's church, by the way, that he grew up. Best friends I think he was Dutch Reformed. I think he was best friends with Robert Schuller. And if you've never read anything by Norman Vincent Peale, also a radio man, phenomenal writer, and he tells this story of Bob. I don't think I've ever told this, and Andrew, we can cut it out if we did. But Bob Crumer tells me the story of when Norman Vincent Peale was coaching him running, and he said he was pushing Bob. He was pushing him, and Bob was holding back. And he said, Bobby, let me ask you a question. Yes, coach. He says, when you squeeze an orange, what comes out? And Bob said, I don't know, coach. Orange juice, I guess. He says, no, not really. He says, the truth is when you squeeze an orange, whatever comes out is what's inside. And he said, what you'll find is that only 2% of the people, that when they get squeezed, will actually look at what comes out and make adjustments and then go back and get squeezed again. The other 98% of the people will do whatever it takes to get out from underneath the pressure of being squeezed in the first place. They don't want to see what's inside. They don't want to see their guts turned inside out. And I can tell you that I have bitched and moaned and complained and whined like a little girl, just like anybody else when the pressure has come on. When I owe money in taxes, when I've got credit card debt, when I've got a car payment I got to make, when I don't have enough cash to go on vacation, when I lost my job again and again and again, when I lost my business again and again and again, when I got managed out of the company that I founded. I have whined and cried and complained like a little girl because I've been exhausted and tired. But then I'll go take a nap, I'll go rest, and then I'll wake up and I'll say, all right, let's take a look at the crap that is coming out of my body by being squeezed so hard that I can't see straight. And I'll take a look at it and I'll try to improve. Not always, not right away, not even consistently, but just over time, a little bit at a time. And over time, what I've realized is that story is exactly right. The thing that bothers me the most about people who lobby on the side of the liberal position is that they are advocating for whining. They're advocating for saying, hey, give a guy a break. Give a gal a chance. Give this single mom free housing. Give them the fish. And the problem with that is, do we give money away? We give a lot of money away.
I got no problem giving a fish as long as I'm training them how to fish while we're sharing fish.
But as soon as they're done with the fish in their belly.
Yeah, you got to feed them first.
You got to feed them. Jesus always fed them first, right?
Yeah.
He fed them and then he taught them.
That's right.
It's tough to get people to pay attention if you haven't eaten during this podcast, please push pause now and go and feed yourself.
Exactly. Then come back.
But if you... If you're advocating for whining instead of advocating for taking responsibility for oneself, I think that seems to be the bottom line for me. And I've heard Republicans whine. I've whined, cried, moaned, bitched, said it shouldn't be the way that it is. And then as soon as I got done whining, I would get up and try to get back up off the floor, out of a financial situation, back into an apartment, out of my car, into a job, into some cash. And through that process, I guess because life has been more difficult, I think, for us than many, and some could say, well, what do you know? You're a 50-year-old white dude and you're rich. Some could say that. But I've also raised 7 people and been the sole breadwinner for a family of 9 for 30 years. I've also been laid off, fired, and gone out of business over 30 times. I've been very rich and very broke and very rich and very broke again, and now we're on our way back for the 3rd time. And so we've lived life in extremes that have made sometimes extremely difficult, to where I don't think I've ever been suicidal, but I've certainly been so depressed that I don't know how I can take another step forward, because it has been so difficult to carry the burden of this family and debt loads and finances and hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax debt at times but when I'm rested, then I go back to my core belief that is, God made us stronger on the inside than our circumstances are on the outside. And I've had enough growth and enough achievement and enough overcoming of circumstances to realize that the opportunity for personal development is unlimited, and your ability to overcome whatever the circumstances are. If you feel that there are blockers for you in your race, in your creed, in your color, in where you live, in where you work, in what you make, in who you have responsibility for, I can just tell you, you can make progress in those areas to an infinite degree mentally, and create enough of a gap and a standard to where even if you don't leave the country of your origin and stay in South Africa, you can become a Nelson Mandela. Even if you don't leave your country of origin within India, you can become a Mahatma Gandhi. And even if you don't leave your country of origin, or if you do leave your country of origin, but you don't leave your profession of church parishioner and sister, you can become a Mother Teresa. You can become a Helen Keller. There are examples everywhere in every demographic of people overcoming. And it would make me sick to my stomach to be an advocate letting people off the hook and saying that whining is better. It's not better. Whining is not better. It doesn't do you any good. All it does is make you feel like a piece of crap. And then nobody cares really that you're whining. And then as soon as you stop whining, you're going to realize you're in the same position you were in before, except you've been speaking death and defeat and things aren't going to be working out. And so that, when I say what's the difference about being conservative, conservatives advocate for taking responsibility for your life, total ownership, Jocko Willink. I mean, whatever did it hurt for somebody to say, I take full responsibility for my life?
So
how did that ever cause harm?
You're excellent with your ability to pitch anything. And so if I were to ask you, I'm a Democrat, I'm on the fence, I've got an election coming up, I'm seeing some things that I do not appreciate about my party, but I don't know very much, because the tendency is for us to get into our groups and not ever cross the party lines.
Yep.
Give me a 5-second pitch or whatever. Give me the pitch as to why I should consider voting conservative.
Welcome to a group that will advocate the personal strength and energy inside of you, and that should come out and be your standard operating procedure for life.
All right. Awesome. The next pro that we're going to cover, just like we did on the other episode, is pro being in your own business. I think that we could close out in the next 10 minutes, at least 10 to 15 minutes, on what if we're going to go. We went on the prior episode pro having a job and security. There was room for growth. There was the ability to not be permanent. Like a lot of times being in your own business means that you can't be very transient. You have to be in one place and having a job.
God, business has changed so much in the last 10 years.
So tell us why should we consider getting into our own business? What are the advantages?
I'm going to draw. I'm just thinking of a matrix here, just a simple Punnett square: business and employment, and organized and disorganized. I would say that if you are disorganized as a person, you are probably better off as an employee, because you will need guardrails around.
Like at bowling, the bumpers.
Yeah, bumpers.
Bumpers.
Bumpers will keep the disorganized person. I've never thought about it this way, actually, until you asked me the question. But bumpers will keep a disorganized person from going in the gutter. We need police. I don't know what has got me on this kick, but I've been watching these reels on people getting arrested for DUIs over the last week. I've probably watched a dozen of them. Hey, and they're fascinating to me.
I watched our friend Rebecca's husband's on the CHP.
Don't tell me you watched him get arrested.
No.
For a DUI.
I watched a reel that she had posted of an there was a car going the wrong way on the highway.
Oh, mm-hmm.
and the police officer was weaving back. I didn't realize that that's why a lot of times they'll stop the highway and he's weaving back
they're
and forth
going the
because
wrong way.
there's somebody coming the wrong way down the freeway and they have to get in there and they have to back
How
up
do they
all of
know,
the traffic.
Like, oh gosh. Oh.
They probably get a call in like
Helicopter?
5 miles as somebody's saying they're going the wrong way on the freeway. So I'm always like, why is that police officer doing this
I always
thing?
wondered what that is. I mean,
it's because there's somebody coming oncoming, and they have to get that guy to stop, and that's the way they get him to stop. So, anyways, I digress. Sorry, but yeah.
But if you look at,
praise God for our police officers, because
we need, praise God for
Amen.
guys in black and blue like that. We need police. It is so important for us to understand the role that police have. Is there abuse taking place? Absolutely. With power comes responsibility. And with great power also comes great abuse of power.
Yeah, absolutely.
But far and away, if we have to accept some abuse with the maintenance of law and order, I would rather have that than no law and order, and then you call the cops and nobody comes. Like, what if nobody comes? What if nobody pulls the drunk drivers off the road?
And it does seem, to your point, it does seem that...
What if drunk drivers are just killing people all the time because there's no law and order?
ROTC or even
it's the lesser of two
police
evils.
academy, a lot of times they'll take kind of wild youth and they'll put them in an organization like that, disorganized persons into an organization with highly structured rules and responsibilities, and it will keep people... it'll definitely can produce some really good
but I would say,
turnarounds.
and I've found this in my own life. One of the most impactful, I'd say top 5 most impactful books I've ever read is Success: The Glenn Bland Method. Success: The Glenn Bland Method. In that book, he tells about how he built, as an entrepreneur, in 5 years, one of the largest insurance companies in existence, Coach's Insurance Company. There isn't a lot on the internet about Glenn Bland, but he's a fascinating guy. His book is fabulous. And he talks about a daily process. I haven't thought about that in a while, but I'm doing now what he talked about in the book that I read years ago, just consistently, just crushing my daily routine of stuff. And Glenn Bland talked about how he built a system over a period of years that made him extremely organized, and that he began itching after a while for the types of personal growth. He was flying from San Antonio back to Waco, Texas, back in probably the mid-'60s. And he stops off in the airport bookstore. His flight's delayed, and he picks up a copy of Think and Grow Rich. And he talks about how he reads in Think and Grow Rich that men who and he's talking about women too, okay? Talking about all colors, all genders, humans. Man who makes plans will always dictate to men that don't make plans. And men that don't make plans will always be dictated to. And so I think that there is a flywheel of momentum that gets built in planning and structure and planning and structure and planning and structure and planning and structure, blah, 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 of organization or of alcoholism or of spending and gambling away your money. There's that momentum that ends up building. And if you build and build and build that discipline of organization over a period of time, eventually you'll get to the point you were like, I have to be in my own deal because I can't work for this.
Well, it's really fun to be. It's really fun to be 6 years old and driving at Disneyland on the Autopia vehicles, but eventually you want to get off the track.
I like going to Disneyland on the Utopia vehicles, but I don't want to commute on the 405 in one of those things, right? So I think that if you're disorganized, you want to be an employee. If you're disorganized as a business owner, you will fail so fast. You will lose so much money. You will have a train wreck life. You will bring dozens or hundreds of people down into the pit of hell financially with you. I'm not kidding. I've watched people who fall asleep at the wheel and they have no business being in business for themselves. And as a result, whatever luck they get, whatever money they raise because of some harebrained scheme that they conjure up, ends up in just catastrophe.
Well, we were talking when we went to Harris Ranch and the server Alexis, and we were talking about how there's like this overwhelming percentage of multi-millionaire business owners whose first job was at McDonald's.
Yeah.
And I think that it's because of the system. I think that they end up becoming.
And by the way, does McDonald's have the best food? Not even close.
But
I would go as far to say they have probably the worst food.
It's definitely not good for you, but the system is bar none.
The system is the
standard, the golden fry standard.
The golden fry standard, right? And I'm not against McDonald's. I mean, I eat McDonald's. I try to eat salads, and they don't serve alcohol, so I can still eat there. But going back to that concept of like the advantage of being in a business, here's the advantage of being an employee. You're told what to do. You know how much you're going to make. And as long as you keep your nose clean and the business doesn't fail, you'll have bumpers that will at least take care of your basic necessities, which is hopefully food, possibly a place to live. And, you know, I think these days and age, I think even over insurance, I would say a cell phone. I think a cell phone, whether or not you have access to an electric grid of your own, access to an electric grid, you can plug in at a restaurant. I would say the number one bill that we would probably need to pay every single month would be a cell phone bill for communication. And number two would be basic minimums of rice and beans on food. Third would be electric grid to keep your food warm, cool, you know, in the fridge. Fourth is probably rent. Fifth would be car insurance. You don't have to make your car payment, but you have to make your car insurance, because if you get in a crash and you don't have insurance, you go to jail. So, but if you're not, but we were talking about this the other day as far as our standards of organization and stuff. Like, I've been homeless before, but we sit there and I go, man, if I had a tent, this is how I would do it. I'd make sure it was, you know, southern exposure in the mornings, and maybe turn it if I needed to. I'd figure out where the best place to sit would be so I could watch the game after I was done, you know, working my 16-hour days. And, you know, it's like that's what keeps you from being homeless. That's kind of what keeps you from being homeless. Like what? Yeah, so you could kind of say, you know, a job versus having a business. It's the same thing. If you're really disciplined, you're probably not going to be homeless. And I'm not saying all homeless people are non-disciplined. There's mental health issues. There's drugs. There's all kinds of military stuff.
And
abandonment issues. And I'm not judging anybody that's homeless. I'm just saying that
you found yourself there, but you didn't stay there.
I didn't stay there because I got more organized. I became more organized. I learned how to pay the bills first that kept me living indoors versus outdoors.
Why don't you tell the story as we wrap up? And this will be the perfect story that goes along with the conservatism that we're talking about, that goes along with owning your own business and positive mental attitude.
Please, before you ask your question, please note, I'm an advocate for people understanding how strong they really are, which is why you don't need permanent government assistance. You don't need permanent people feeling sorry for you. You don't need a permanent narrative of whining. It doesn't do good. It does bad. And a narrative of I'm responsible, a narrative of I can do it, a narrative of I might need a little help. We've had help, no problem with that. But the narrative of I own this and I'm going to find a way out actually does something inside yourself that triggers a level of growth that is the antithesis of being offended and feeling sorry for oneself. And I just want people to experience that.
So please wrap us up and tell us the story wrap this episode up and tell us the story of Og Mandino and his situation that he found himself in. And I think it will sum up the episode perfectly.
Og Mandino is so important in my life. Og Mandino was raised in New Hampshire. He wanted to be a writer. And a week before he graduates from high school, his mom drops dead of a heart attack.
With him? In the kitchen?
In the kitchen. And I don't know the situation, that it was single mom or just dad wasn't around, or maybe his dad needed help, but he jettisons his plans in grief to go to college to become a writer, and he signs up for the Army Air Corps at the time, and goes and he's an enlisted guy on a bomber flying under the command of Jimmy Stewart, who was a captain. And in the Army, he wants to write. He just wants to write. But he gets out of the Army, and then he gets a job selling insurance. He gets married and doesn't really like his job that much, doesn't really have good work habits, and ends up adding a habit of stopping off at the corner bar every night to pour one back with the guys. And that momentum of self-destructive behavior, in his case, winners typically, when they start doing stuff wrong, they get really good at doing wrong, really good at doing bad. They excel at whatever they're doing.
Well, it sounds like he was not processing his juice that was pouring out.
No, he didn't want to look at it.
He didn't want to look at it.
He wanted to hide, as we all do. Hiding and procrastination is part of life. It is a defense mechanism. It is our comfort zone. It is there to keep us from dying. So I'm not advocating for, well, just get out of your comfort zone. Again, that is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. Get out of your comfort zone. And I know what they're trying to say, but they're going about it in exactly the wrong way. You need to do the opposite of that. You need to stay in your comfort zone. You need to build success and winning from that comfort zone. And if we look at Og Mandino, he ends up becoming an alcoholic. Because of that, he lost his job. Because of that, he lost his house. Because of that, he lost his wife and daughter and became estranged from his family. And because of that, he sunk deeper into depression, drank even more, and became a homeless person, a homeless alcoholic. And at the age of 35, in a shop window, sees a gun for $15, I think it was.
It was a pawn shop, I believe.
It was a pawn shop window, and he sees a revolver for $15, and he had $10 to his name. He didn't even have enough money to kill himself, is what he talks about. And so he just kind of moves on. He was in and out of cars, in and out of, but he found libraries.
Because it's cold. Isn't he in like Chicago or something?
Chicago, New Hampshire, Cleveland.
Oh, yeah.
So he's in Cleveland, and he stumbles into this library as soon as they opened, middle of winter. It's cold as F outside, 20 degrees, right? And he's in Cleveland. God bless you if you live in Cleveland. And he finds this book. And the book was Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude, which he, being a former insurance man, could relate to the rags to riches story of the billionaire founder of the insurance company that eventually got sold to Aon, I think. And it was W. Clement Stone. He was a billionaire, 8th grade graduate, 8th grade dropout, insurance man, billionaire. And he reads this book by Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone. And he starts to get inspired of this understanding of a shift in his constitution. A couple of years later, he makes his way to Chicago.
Didn't he end up going to the library like every day to stay? Yeah. But he's like, I'm going to either kill myself or I'm going to do this positive mental stuff, and I'm going to go all in on positive mental attitude.
And he ends up going and soliciting W. Clement Stone to work for him, selling insurance, which he did. And it was at the early stages where he still had some one-on-one contact with him. And then he started to write, and W. Clement Stone put him in charge of what has become Success Magazine. The most recent publisher of that was Darren Hardy. But Success Magazine, which was originally founded by Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone to encourage the positive mental attitude of the salesman working for W. Clement Stone's insurance company. Well, he ends up becoming editor-in-chief and growing the circulation from a few thousand to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of subscribers to Success Magazine. He's the editor-in-chief of this magazine. And then at the age, and we'll have to put the year, I think if he served in World War II on a bomber as an 18-year-old in 42, that must have meant that he was born 42, 43, 44. U.S. didn't enter the war actually until 42. So call it 44, 34, 24 would have been about when Og Mandino was born. So if he's born in 24, Greatest Salesman in the World didn't come out until late 60s. So Og Mandino was like 45. So it'd been like 10 years since he'd brought himself out. But he's executive chief publisher of a magazine. He'd made plenty of money. He could support himself. He had gotten remarried. He'd cut the booze. And he starts along the process of these incredible habits that he gained by being in close proximity to W. Clement Stone, who had taken total responsibility for himself when he was poor and rose to billionaire status. And then he writes this book. His first book becomes a magical New York Times colossal magnum opus book called The Greatest Salesman in the World. It was the first book that Og Mandino wrote.
If you know someone with a positive attitude who's successful, they have read.
Guarantee you they have read The Greatest Salesman in the World.
Matthew McConaughey raves about it regularly.
There's a handful of books that everybody in the PMA
just
world has read.
The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he ends up writing The Greatest Salesman in the World, and he makes enough money from it that he can retire. And then he goes on and he just keeps writing. But he kept this picture in mind of this ideal of him wanting to be an author. And eventually, I dreamed about having 7 kids for 20 years. I wanted to be your husband. I wanted to be father of these 7 kids. I wanted to be successful in the technology enterprise software sales business. And I dreamed about it and thought about it and worked at it and put 3x5 cards so I can figure out what are routing tables and how this stuff works. I didn't know anything about it, but I wanted it so badly. And now I want more. I want more than that. I want digital online courses about how to build successful sales teams. I want public speaking engagement. I want workshops. I want to travel around the world and do consulting and do all of this stuff and be able to create online communities of people through apps like Circle. Like the tools just keep growing and keep getting bigger for the ideas that we can do. And the ideas, the ability to communicate with other people where we're going, what we're trying to accomplish, and that crystallizing just over and over and over and over again, getting more clear about architecting our life of what we want to do. And I think that it's not that people are lazy or that they can't do it. I think that it's they haven't been doing it long enough to have a handful enough of victories to see the connective tissue between what we think about all day long and ending up eventually becoming like Og Mandino. So if you haven't read Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino, if you haven't read Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude by W. Clement Stone and Napoleon Hill, if you haven't read Success, the Glenn Bland Method, if you haven't read Magic of Believing by Claude M. Bristol, I would greatly encourage you to pick up these books and read something in a positive book. Just underline one thing a week. Sunday night before you plan your week, pick up a book and read one positive thing and underline it. And then pretty soon you'll be underlining something every day. And pretty soon you'll be reading a book or 2 a month. And pretty soon you will start to realize that the fabric of our external lives are almost it is a perfect representation of the fabric of our thought processes on our inside lives, but on a maybe a 24 to 36 month time delay.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning into this episode. We appreciate that you've given us your time, and you can see now why I was so excited to talk about today's episode. Man, when you get going, let's just get going.
We got going.
Hopefully we encouraged you to be your best self and present your best self moving forward.
If we encourage you to be your worst self, I will apologize right now. That is not the goal for today. Our goal for today is to try to, it really is, Jessica, it is to try to let people know, if you're watching or listening out there, that there is a connective tissue between what you think about, how you picture it, how you get it into your nervous system, how do you build your body, build your mind, build your relationships, build your ability to focus and plan. And as you do that, you will start to watch your life literally transform before your eyes.
And whether you vote Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green Party, whether you own a business or whether you're in a job for somebody else, know that we are pro you and we appreciate you. So have a good night and God bless.
Thanks for being with us.